This is the 4th of November 2021, and a special word of thanks to all the officials and particularly our procedural officer who put this meeting together and who also liaised with everybody for us to have this special meeting while we are still in a constituency period. And I really appreciate your cooperation and willingness to assist in this regard. We are here today to finalize our final negotiating mandate from the Western Cape, and then obviously to convey this to the National Council of Provinces, who originally indicated that they needed this feedback by next week and Tuesday for their meeting, or actually earlier, so that they can meet on Tuesday. Apparently their dates are also moving around, and but between myself and the procedural officer, we thought it best not to again try and change dates from our side, particularly as we already have a full schedule for next week as well. Can I perhaps just, before we start with the item on the agenda, just quickly give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves this morning, and please can we start with the members first?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matlodi Maseko, and I'm the member of the Standing Committee.
You're most welcome.
Good morning, Deirdre Bartman, member of the committee.
Good, thank you very much. I think the Honourable Heron has also just joined us.
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, I'm here, a member of the committee.
Good, thank you very much. And can we now move over to the officials from the Department of Environmental Affairs?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Ayub Mohammed from Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. And I'm assisted by Paul Hardcastle, Anik Rousseau, and Kayleen Mawata. She's also in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any representatives from Cape Nature currently online?
No, Chair. They indicated that they will not be attending this meeting because they are. We had an engagement with them, and they are satisfied with our responses, so they will not be joining us. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. And then as support officers, I've already referred to Ms. Niekerk. Hearty welcome to you, as well as to Mr. Hassan from IT, who's assisting us, and then also Ms. Nomfundu Mshumpela, who is always assisting and helping us for things to run smoothly. Now, honourable members, just to quickly recap on where we are currently, you will recall that we considered this bill previously. By the way, this bill has been coming a long time. I see in some 2 weeks' time, it would have been introduced to the NCOP 2 years ago. And that's also why I'm so grateful that, you know, from our side, we're not delaying any processes. And then we considered this bill, and we made some 4, if I may call it, minor proposals for the NCOP to consider, and as all the other provinces did. And obviously the Standing Committee deliberated on this. The minutes of those meetings have been circulated amongst our members, and I regret to say that unfortunately our input was not adopted at the Standing Committee, but for us to get some feedback on what was indeed then adopted or proposed by the Standing Committee, and that is serving in front of us, I want to hand over to Mr. Paul Hardcastle, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Mohammed?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hardcastle will take us through the comments received. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Hardcastle.
Good morning, everybody. I may just quickly want to I'll switch on the camera that everybody can see me, and then I'm going to switch it off again. Thank you. Chair, just for clarity, I'm just quickly going to go through the 4 comments or the negotiating mandate from the Western Cape, and then go through the 4 inputs that we gave, and for clarity in terms of if they were adopted or not. First of all, we made a comment on clause 2 that forests are prone to fires and some instances may be necessary to implement short-term solutions to require the necessary steps to be taken, and that may on the onset, at the outset, be regarded as taking a step backwards, but in the long term will be beneficial to the environment and to people. So we proposed the introduction or inclusion of the term long term. Now, that comment, if we look at, first of all, we commented on a B version. Sorry, let me just clarify. We commented on a B version, and then the information submitted to us was the C version, which is then, in other words, what the amendments that was made by the NCOP, and then the D version is obviously the final with all the amendments. That's my understanding of what all the different versions is. But if you look at the D version, therefore, that comment was not included. So they did not include the term long term. It is not a significant amendment, and you may also read a long term into the interpretation of the clause, but nonetheless, that comment wasn't included. Then we made a comment on clause 6. In terms of sections 15.3 of the Principal Act, that deals with the effect of the declaration of protected trees is silent on the use of electronic media, electronic and social media in the publishing of key information. And it is submitted that reference should be made to electronic media, electronic and social media. In that clause, and that comment was also not included in the D version of the bill. Then we commented on clause 9 of the bill. I think now in the D version it's clause 8. The proposed addition specifically prohibits any mining activities within state forest, with the exception if an existing agreement exists or in terms of applicable legislation. Due to significant impact of mining activities, it is submitted that this may only be permitted for existing agreements, and that under no circumstances, as the inclusion of applicable legislation is suggested, should be included because it's too broad and unclear. So it was submitted that the deletion of the phrase applicable legislation. And if we look at the D version, in fact, that comment was taken into consideration, and that the clause 8 now does not refer to applicable legislation. Then clause 15, this deals with the appeal provisions. A new appeal provisions was included in the bill. And the essence of the Western Cape's input was that we believe that this should be the subject of regulations rather than in a Principal Act. And this comment was not included, and the bill as it stands now still includes all the details of the appeal provisions. It's a whole new section that was included in the bill. So, Chair, that is in essence the Western Cape's inputs and how it was considered. And I again confirm that our comment on clause 2 was not included. Comments on clause 6 was not included, but comments on clause 8, which is now 9, was included. And then proposal for clause 15 was also not considered in the bill. So, Chair, that's from my side in terms of the input from the Western Cape and how it was considered by the NCOP. And I think none of the issues that wasn't included is fatal flaws, if I can put it like that. Yes, it's ideal that appeal provisions not be in the Principal Act itself, but in regulations. And then the other one was the reference to social media and social and electronic media. I think what is normally the case is that if there's gazetting to be done, then that is done in terms of gazetting a newspaper. But electronic media is definitely considered if it is about information submitted to individuals, then they do regard social media as important. But in this instance, probably is consistent with other legislation. It refers to, when there's gazetting, it refers to newspapers and state in the government gazette. So, Chair, that's from my side in terms of the submission from Western Cape and how that was considered by the NCOP. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. In the absence of any hands, can we ask you to also proceed and to just go through the proposed amendments that are currently in front of us, starting with the what seems like tightening up of some of the definitions. Please, if you could take us through that and also just share with us the Western Cape Department's stance on these proposed changes.
Okay, Chair, from my onset, I'll just mention that we did not in detail discuss all of these. I will try to, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to also come in here if there's anything from their side that they can add. But yes, I will try to go through this as quickly as possible. You've said that there's amendments to the definitions. That's fine. There's a definition for assignment, and that there's no problem there. It's not controversial. It maybe provides clarity, so we don't have a problem with that. Appeal committee is now defined, and that's obviously because of the inclusion of appeal provisions. So that definition is required to clarify. The details of that is in the bill itself. Then there's a definition for destruction of natural forests. And there's a definition for it. And there can be lots of debates on that definition, but I think it's under the circumstances it's relatively clear. Then there is a definition for natural forests, where it's an amendment of the definition of indigenous forests that was already defined in the Act. It's this one replaces that definition. After the scissor of natural forest, there's a definition for new land use and how it's defined. Again, I think that it's neither here nor there. Actually, it's fine. It can stand as it is. One can argue about the clarity thereof, but under the circumstances, I think it's a doable definition. Then it is the definition of woodland has been amended. yeah, it will probably be a challenge in the interpretation in practice. But I think that even the old definition, there may have been some interpretation challenges, but because it refers to the 5% canopy cover, which is difficult to assess, but then also the reference to in a degraded state, it may be less than 5%. Now, the challenge would be what constitutes degraded and when is it degraded and how do you determine that that percentages. But I think under the circumstances, that's at least a definition that they've submitted that's open to interpretation. But it's under circumstances. I think it will be difficult to find a better definition than that one at this moment in time. Then, in terms of clause 2A, the inclusion of a provision on public trusteeship and the national forest resources. It's just a clause that has been inserted. The national government, as a public trustee of the nation's forest resources, acting through the minister, must ensure that the resource, together with land and related ecosystems which they inhabit, are protected, conserved, developed, regulated, managed, controlled, utilized in a sustainable and equitable manner for the benefits of all people and in accordance with the Constitution and developmental mandate of government. And that's, yeah, I think it's a broad definition, but it's fine. We don't have any problem with such a definition. Then clause 3, amending section 7 of the Principal Act, and that's just some wording changes, virtually grammatical changes, and some added wording. And it's interesting because it is not only therefore referring to trees, but all indigenous vegetation in natural forest. So it's not only the trees itself, but it's associated indigenous vegetation. That means it includes the undergrowth under the canopy of trees. And then subsequent, also the further subsequent change in subsection B there is that also referring to the indigenous vegetation. So no problem there. We don't have any comment or concern about it. And then in subsection clause 3C, by addition of the following subsections, if a person is in breach of subsection 1A, the minister may, by written notice, inform the person of the nature of the alleged breach, steps that must be taken to prevent or redress such a breach, and a period within which such steps must be done, and so on. So I think this is a clause similar to something like a section 28, the duty of care principle. So I think this is an acceptable clause. It's a good clause. So it's doing something similar to section 28, which is a duty of care in terms of NEMA. That you prevent action or prevent wrong actions from continuing, and that you must remediate such damage. Then amendments to section 8 of the Act. Section 8 of the Principal Act is hereby amended by the addition of the following subsection. A person may not conduct an activity in a protected area which is inconsistent with the conservation, recreation, and other management principles of the area, except under the license issued by the minister in unacceptable circumstances that may be determined by the minister. I'll have to check section 8 again. What the whole section is about. Let me just check that quickly. Section 8 of the Principal Act. Okay, but this is about protected areas. I just wanted to double check that. Yes, this is about protected areas, and so nobody may conduct an activity in a protected area. So this is actually to be able to clearly identify illegal activities and that action may be taken. So again, that department doesn't have a problem with that addition to the Act, and then. Clause 5, Section 14 of the Principal Act is hereby amended by the addition of the following subsection, that the minister may issue a written order or immediately terminate the felling, mutilation or destruction of an individual tree or group of trees if he or she has reasonable grounds to believe that such tree or group of trees may qualify to be declared, and then added the section also a controlled forest area in accordance with section 17. That's part B that was added. So yeah. Again, we don't have a problem, and I think a lot of the amendments in the bill deals with providing clarity on management actions and what must be done to prevent inappropriate activities from happening in forests in general. Amendment of section 15. Section 15 of the Principal Act, this is now clause 6, is hereby amended by the substitute for the wording preceding paragraph 1 by the following words. The minister must by notice and 2 newspapers circulating and nationally published, and it's again, this is where we made the comments about also about social and electronic media. And I think so this amendment from the Western Cape wasn't accepted, and it's therefore the requirement of being gazetted in 2 newspapers and in a government gazette. I think this is consistent with most other legislation in terms of notices being published. Then in amendments to section 17 of the Act, this is just a deletion, and as clause 7A is a deletion. That's not a very significant change. And then, in clause B, 7B, there is an additional subsection. Which allow for the minister may declare a controlled forest area, and due to the urgency of the situation, the minister may proceed with the declaration without prior consultation with or affording a prior hearing to any affected person. But as soon as reasonably possible after the declaration, the minister must then consult with and afford hearing to affected persons, consider any representation received during such consultation, and confirm, vary, or cancel the declaration that is put in. And then 14 also, the minister may, if the minister is of the opinion that the owner failed to comply with the notice, issued in terms of 3 and 4, he or she may take reasonable steps to remedy the situation, recover consequential damages and costs from the owner, and approach a competent court for appropriate relief. It's again, I think this is consistent with the notion of a duty of care, where appropriate powers must be given to the minister to deal with unacceptable activities and to remedy the impacts thereof. Then amendments to Section 23 of the Act. Section 23 is amended by the addition of the following subsection. No person may engage in any prospecting activity in the state forest except in terms of an existing lease agreement to mine gravel or sand for road maintenance. And it's again, let me just check this. The comment that was made is the comment of the Western Cape was based on this one, I think. Clause 9, which is now clause 8, yes. And as you can see, the reference to other legislation or appropriate applicable legislation has been deleted from that clause now. So, yes, definitely there the Western Cape's input was considered. Then amendments to Section 34. Clause 9, in other words, just the addition or actually the addition of youth, women, and persons with disability. Then clause 10, which amends Section 35 of the Act. Section 35 of the Principal Act is hereby amended by the inclusion or the substitution of subsections 4 and 5 with the following subsections. It's minor wording changes, rather grammatical changes. Subsequent to other amendments, but there is no significant implications based on that amendments. And then clause 11, amending section 36 of the Principal Act. It's substituting subsection 6 for the wording with the following wording, and then it's just the functions of the forest of the Committee on Forest Access are to advise the council. To advise the council, the department, and the minister. That is based on also the amendments to provide for the council. Then section 37, amended by clause 12. It's also relatively it's not a significant provision, and we don't have a problem with that provision. Section 36(7) of the Principal Act is amended by the substitution of subsection 3 with the following subsection: as the chairman of the council must provide the minister with advice or information emanating from any meeting, and then deleting within 2 weeks of the council within a period not exceeding a month. That is just starting up on administrative issues related to the council, so we don't have any problem with that. It doesn't have any significant implications or substantial implications. And then amendments of section 37. subsection 47, section 47 of the Principal Act is hereby amended by the substitution in subsection 1 of subparagraph Roman I of the following subparagraph, deleting a province or other, and is just stating therefore an organ of state in accordance with section 99 of the Constitution. That is just an amendment so that its organ of state is wider than organ of state includes, in other words, a province. So it doesn't substantially change the clause or the application of the clause. And then the insertion of a whole chapter, that's the appeal chapter. I don't think I'm going to go through the whole appeal chapter, but it's the right to appeal and then an appeal committee, and then how the appeal committee is constituted and members replaced, and also then the advice given to the minister and the minister's consideration of such an appeal. So I don't
Mr.
think I want
Hardcastle.
to. Yes.
Thank you. Can I just say, I think, we don't need to consider, as you now indicated, that which served before this committee before. If we could just consider the amendments brought about by the other provinces, between the B version, which we previously considered, and the D version, which is the latest one. Perhaps if you could just concentrate on those then. Thank you.
Okay, but then it is actually very little. I apologize that I misunderstood what you wanted. Then, well, I've dealt with all of the amendments then already, because the definitions, then I'm going to go to the C version, in other words. Chair, then it's the C version, and that it deals with all of the changes that was done based on the C version, and then it's just, as we have said, it's a definition for the destruction of natural forests, and we've got no problem with that definition, and then also the addition of new land use as a definition. And then the replacement of the definition for woodland. And then clause 7 was rejected, and I have to go back to the B version just to check what clause 7 is going to be. Clause 7 was clause 7 was the amended subsection 16, section 16 of the Principal Act was amended by the substitution of subsection in subsection 1 of paragraph B of the following paragraphs. So that was just the deletion of the words or and an addition of the words or a state forest as part of it. That is the clause 7 that was, if I understand it now correctly, that has been rejected. Then clause 9. On page 5, line 13, to omit subsection 4 and to insert the following one, and that is then the one that did consider the comment from the Western Cape that no mining can only be done in terms of an existing agreement, but they therefore deleted the reference to applicable legislation. Then on clause 10, to omit paragraph J and then substitute that paragraph with youth, women, and persons with disability. That wording is much better in terms of our current the current view on equity, so representativity and equity. So that clause is obviously supported. Then there's changes to the memorandum of the bill, memorandum on the objects of the bill that was made. I'm not sure, I'll have to go through this, and it will probably be consistent with the above changes. So, Chair, based on the C version, it is just a few definitions that was added or amended, and then in those few changes to the bill that I've just mentioned now. Sorry, Chair, I went through the whole amendment of all the amendment clauses, but these the amendments that was affected by the Council of Provinces based on all the inputs was only those few inputs.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Hardcastle. I'm going to give an opportunity now to Advocate Marstorp for his input as our legal advisor. Perhaps if I could ask you, Advocate Marstorp, when you get to clause 8, there's a comma between to mine, comma, gravel or sand for road maintenance. And I was just wondering whether that comma shouldn't be removed. But please start where you wanted to. And when you get to that clause, if you could just help me to get some clarity, I'll really appreciate that. Over to you, Advocate Marstorp.
Thank you very much, Chair. In fact, I was only going to refer to that particular clause, and I was only going to refer to that very out of place comma there. If I look at the context of that provision that's now been added, it speaks to the prohibition of mining activity, and that there may be no mining activity without a lease agreement. And of course, one can mine gravel and one can mine sand in order to effect road maintenance. So without the comma, that provision makes absolute sense. If one inserts the comma as it stands there now, then it almost lends definitions to the words gravel and sand as if they can be verbs in that context. One cannot gravel, one can grovel, but not gravel, and one cannot sand. And if one leaves that comma there, then it gives verb status to the word gravel and verb status to the word sand, which is not proper grammar. I am of the view, in view of the context of the provision, I'm of the view, in view of the purpose of that provision, that the comma is out of place, and in fact, that the word mine is the verb which precedes the word gravel and sand in order to do road maintenance. I am of the view that the provision should then in fact read as follows: no person may engage in any prospecting or mining activity in a state forest except in terms of a lease agreement to mine gravel or to mine sand for purposes of road maintenance. That comma is out of place. That is my view. That was in fact the only comment I was going to make, Chairperson. As far as the other additions, accepted amendments are concerned, I'm quite okay with that. Thanks so much, Chairperson.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Advocate Marstorp. Honourable members, I now give you an opportunity to ask questions, to comment, to express views. If you so wish, please do so by indication of by raising your hand electronically. I do not see, so it seems to me you all seem to be happy with that. Now, Ms. Niekerk, I'm just left with the question. It seems to me, and I'm grateful, Advocate Marstorp and myself both picked on the same problem that we have, and how do we deal with something like that? Because I think it's really more of a typing correction, but as Advocate Marstorp has indicated, you know, whether the comma is there or not, indeed makes quite a difference. How can we deal with that one, or is it something that we will have to give through in our response to the NCOP? Ms. Nikak as our advisor in this regard. Okay, and I also recognize Honorable Bartman's hand. Please, Honorable Bartman, go first.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies.
Chair, I'm not sure if we can make any extra comments on a final mandate in this regard. But in general, it seems as if the general principles are being supported by the department. And if we aren't allowed to make any new comments or recommendations to the NCOP, I would then suggest that we go forth to put forward our views on the mandate.
Thank you for that. Ms. Nikak?
My apologies, Chairperson, I just lost connection there. But Member Bartman is correct. In terms of the mandated procedures of Provinces Act, the province cannot submit a final mandate conditionally. However, what you could do, I would advise then that the problem that was picked up with Clause 8, you could perhaps write a letter to the NCOP Select Committee, and that letter will then accompany the final mandate. But the correction cannot be taken up in the final mandate per se. All right?
Thank you very much for that clarity, and it makes sense to me. I trust the other members will also agree with that. Can I then ask honourable members for your views on this? I see there's a thumbs up from Honourable Maseko. Honourable Maseko, perhaps if you would just perhaps put that in wording to say that whether we support this and whether we are able to adopt as a final mandate from the Western Cape support for the amendment bill.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in support of the amendment and also of the suggestion of the procedural officer that you write the letter to that effect.
Honourable, and thank you. I see Honourable Bartman's hand.
Thank you, Chair. I support the views put forward by Honourable Maseko.
Thank you. Any other views? Any parties that would like to record a separate view? None. So can we then just formally vote on this? We've got a proposer, we've got a seconder, and I am in support of this. Anybody else that would like to raise their views as well? No, so it seems to be unanimously adopted. Thank you very much for that, honourable members. Honourable members, so the committee's final mandate is then therefore for our representatives from the Western Cape on the NCOP Select Committee to convey our support in terms of this stage report. So I wonder if we can give Ms. Nikak an opportunity to just quickly finalize the letter that we will then be submitting. Ms. Nikak, do we need to give you 5 minutes, or are you ready to perhaps beam the draft report onto the screen?
Chair, it's on the screen. I've just beamed it up. You just need to now read it into record, please.
Thank you very much. So, honourable members, also for record purposes, at the final mandate stage, report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on the National Forest Amendment Bill, B11D of 2016, in the NCOP dated the 4th of November 2021 as follows. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, having considered the subject of the National Forest Amendment Bill B11D of 2016 NCOP, referred to it in accordance with Standing Rule 217, recommends that the House confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the NCOP the authority to support the amendment bill. Report to be considered. Can we also adopt this report then, honourable members? A proposal in this regard?
Chair, I'm not sure if you can see my hand up.
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I support the report.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chair. Second the support.
Proposed, it's been seconded. Any other views? None, so unanimously adopted. Thank you very much. Honourable members, before we close, I omitted at the beginning of this meeting to just consider and carry into this meeting the apologies. Our representative on the Select Committee in the NCOP, Ms. Honourable Kathy Labuschagne, submitted last night to me her apology for not being able to attend this meeting this morning. And perhaps Ms. Nikak, for the record as well, have you received any apologies? People that we invited to this meeting?
Yes, Chairperson, I've just received an apology from Member Pat Maran as well.
Good, thank you very much. And then Ms. Nikak, can I ask whether there's anything in terms of our meeting that was omitted before I just quickly deal with the way forward?
That's yes, Chairperson. It's just the minutes of the 14th of September that the committee still needs to adopt.
Good. Those minutes were also circulated together with the other documentation. Honourable members, are you ready to consider those minutes? Perhaps let me just, before we go to the minutes, just say, so the relevant information of our report will now be transferred by the NCOP liaising officer to the final mandate form as prescribed by the Mandating Procedures of Provinces Act, which will then be signed by the Western Cape Legislature Speaker and then submitted to the NCOP Select Committee. But then also we will have that additional letter from myself as chairperson to just highlight that we believe that there may have been a typographical error in the D version, and that they should consider just attending to that issue as well. And then our committee report will in due course also be forwarded to the legislature, to the House, for consideration. Good, thank you very much for that. Now, Ms. Nikak, I see you've already beamed our minutes of the 14th of September onto the screen. Again,
Chairperson, I wonder if you can see my hand.
Sorry, yes, I see it now. Thank you, Honourable Maseko.
I was just wondering if it's possible that maybe you can release the officials as we continue with the business of the committee.
Good, thank you. I presume that is probably why Mr. Mohammed has also raised his hand. Mr. Mohammed?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Member Maseko, for allowing us to leave. But in leaving, I just want to say, Member Chair and Member, when we do the NEMLA 4, it's going to be a much longer discussion, because having attended the NCOP meeting, myself and my colleagues, with having sat in on that, most of the Western Cape suggestions were not accepted at the NCOP, and that will have implications. So that would be a longer session. We'd also like to understand, and I'll engage with Shireen on this, how this process works going forward, because we just need to know that this is now the final version and no further comments or inputs can be made. And on NEMLA 4, that is, if we're going to be sitting with the last version of NEMLA 4, many of our inputs have not been accepted, and then we then we might not want to support the bill going forward like this one has been. It was quite a clean one, this one. So that's just for information, but and I'll chat to Shireen about that, the procedural officer, and if we can, please be excused. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you for your presence, and particular thanks to Mr. Hardcastle, and you are excused. And I presume, Honourable Maseko, that your hand may still be raised for the point that you wanted to raise, point of order. Good. So again, page 1 of the minutes for the 14th of September. That's for consideration. Page 2. Thank you. Page 3. And page 4. Thank you, honourable members. Honourable Maseko, your hand is raised, as well as that of Honourable Bartman. Over to you, Honourable Maseko. I wonder if Honourable Maseko has dropped off. Honourable Bartman.
Chair, I move to support the minutes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Chair, I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. I second Honourable Bartman.
Good, thank you. Honourable members, there being no other views, this set of minutes is then duly adopted. Thank you very much. Honourable members, just a reminder that we have quite a full schedule next week. Ms. Nikak, perhaps if you wouldn't mind just taking us through that.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, the next meeting is on Tuesday, the 9th of November, from 9 till 1 o'clock, and that will be the annual report discussion of the Department of Agriculture and CACIDRA. And then on the same day, from 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock, the committee will meet to further consider the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you, honourable members, and thank you again. And just a reminder that next week we're starting on Monday already with some standing committee meetings. Honourable Daniel Smith, I note your presence here right at the end as well. Welcome. But with that, honourable members, I believe we've come to the end of our agenda for the day. Anything else that anybody would like to raise before I adjourn this meeting? Ms. Nikak?
Chairperson, just to remind members that the minutes that were just adopted now related to the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill, and the resolutions in those minutes were various concerns and then also recommendations by the committee on various clauses in the bill where the Department of Environmental Affairs had to respond. Now they have responded, and their response to those resolutions has been circulated for members. So perhaps members just want to have a look at that in preparation for next week's meeting. All right, thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Nikak. And again, thank you also for already circulating the documentation, the support documentation for next week's meeting. And with that, honourable members, I am going to adjourn this meeting and wish you all a wonderful day, and again express my appreciation for your willingness to meet during this constituency period. Thank you and goodbye.